So now we're going to service the injector, the brine line flow control, drain line flow control, and the brine valve. So to start, we're going to remove the two screws from the injector cap. Once we have these two screws off, we can remove the injector cap and pull out the brine screen. And from this point, we can actually remove the entire injector body from the valve assembly. And from here, we can see our injectors, our brine line flow control in this structure, our drain line flow control, and our brine valve. So to change the brine valve or remove it, it's quite easy. Just pull it out. You'll notice there's a seal here and a seal here. This seal is actually inside this structure. And to remove it, we're going to want to take it out and just make sure the seal is fine. And the seal is good. It's a good idea to put the seal back and just use a little screwdriver to put it back into its place before we put the brine valve back into the structure. So to insert the brine valve, push the seal back in and simply push the brine valve back in. Next, to change the injectors, we can simply use a flat screwdriver, and there we go. And we can remove the throat. And inside is a second piece, the throat, two parts that make up the injector. And to remove that, we can again use a flat screwdriver. And remove the throat structure. To service the brine line flow control, it's located in this brass housing. We can simply use a crescent wrench, loosen the structure, turn the elbow out, and inside this structure we have a retainer, a brine line flow control retainer. To remove this structure, we can use a small pair of nail pliers and gently remove it. And once inside here, we can see the rubber bright flow control. We can take it out, clean it. When you put it back in, you want to have the beveled edge facing the direction of the flow, so I'm going to put it back in this direction, and then again I'll use the tool to reinsert it back into the fitting, and I'm going to reinstall this back into the injector body. Push the O-ring down so that's seated, and simply thread it back in. There's an O-ring seal, so it doesn't need to be too tight, but I'll use a wrench anyway just to give it a quarter turn from snug. So now we've reinserted our brine line flow control. I should reinsert the injectors. So we start off with the nozzle, the first piece. Drop it inside there. Use a flat screwdriver. We can tell that it's reached the bottom when you get to see the white or the colored part of the injector touch this surface, then we know it's been fully seated. And then next I'm going to install the throat back in. And simply use a flat screwdriver to put this back in. This doesn't need to be over tightened, it just needs to be down to where this surface and this surface are touching, and now we've installed our injectors. So the last part of the structure that we haven't serviced yet is the drain line flow control. You wouldn't need to take the injector body off to get to the drain line flow control, but once we're here, it is pretty easy to get to. Simply pull the red clip and remove the elbow, and our drain line flow control is in the elbow. So you could change it, put the new one back in, put this structure back in, elbow, clip. So, pretty simple. To reassemble this, we're going to put it back into the body. There are 3 O-ring seals you need to watch for here, here, and here. Make sure the seals are present before you put this back. Slide it back in here. There. Don't forget to put your injector screen back in. Put the cap, there's also an O-ring around this cap, make sure it didn't fall off. And put your cap back in, and all that's left is to reinstall the last 2 screws. When you install these back, you don't want to tighten them down all the way on one side. You want to tighten it evenly so it does get evenly distributed. So in this step, I'm going to show how to service the piston seals and spacers in a 165 valve. So first step is to remove the back cover. There's 2 screws. Once we have the back cover removed, we can see we have access to the piston rod, and the piston holder. The first step is we need to remove this piston guide or piston holder. One screw to remove that. Once that's removed, we need to remove the screw that holds the piston to the main drive gear. And from that, now this part of the assembly is no longer attached. Next step is we can remove this drive housing. 2 screws located here. And at this point, we can now remove the power head. Slide it on up like that. And now we have direct access to piston retainer. 3 screws to remove here. And once we remove those screws, we can remove the retainer plate. And from this position, we can actually also service the brine valve. If we wanted to remove the brine valve, simply pull the brine valve out. And when reinserting it, there is a small O-ring in here that needs to stay down there and reserted. So you can expect it for any damage if you were servicing this thing for any leaks or issues. But when you reinstall it, put the O-ring back in first and just make sure it's seated in the proper location, and then reinsert your brine valve. So to get at the piston now, we can simply pull straight up and remove the piston. Sometimes seals and spacers will come along with it. Put that down here. So now we have our piston and assembly removed. If we were going to service the piston or change the piston, we could simply unthread the piston out, put the new piston on, assemble it back. Make sure you tighten it good by hand tight. And to remove the seals now, simply remove the seals, spacers. The seals and the spacers are actually constructed in two parts, and they might come apart when we take the pressure off of them. So dig these out. There's 4 spacers and 5 seals inside the valves. If when taking it apart you do find the spacers come in 2 pieces, they are easily assembled back together. And they're back together. So if you're rebuilding the valve and putting new seals in, or you're simply cleaning it, when you're going to reinsert it, simply follow the reverse assembly instructions. We're going to put a seal, then a spacer, then a seal, so on. So we're going to start off putting back a seal. And when you put it in there, just run your finger down there and make sure the seal's sitting down nice and flush. Then reinsert a spacer. And then just keep the reverse assembly: a seal, spacer, seal, spacer, seal, spacer, and then the last one is a seal. There will be a little bit of a gap here, and that's normal. Again, reinsert your piston. Make sure that piston is on there nice and tight, and simply guide the piston straight back down. And there, we're ready to install the plate. Replace the plate and the 3 screws. When you're reinstalling the screws and you're tightening them down, it's important not to tighten one end all the way. It's kind of like tightening the lugs on your car. You want to evenly distribute the load. So what we do is we start in one corner, go about halfway, then this one, about halfway, and then just kind of go around in a pattern. These just need another quarter turn tight after you've bottomed them out. And we've installed our retainer plate. Now we can reinsert the drive. Simply slide your drive back over here. Just that. And now we'll reinsert these 2 screws. Reinstall the screw that attaches the piston to the main drive gear. And last, reinstall the piston holder. last step, reinstall the cover. And you're complete.